purpose of public official. Welcome, everyone, to the, what is this, April Finance meeting. And that's the Budget, Finance, and Growth Committee for the Cincinnati School Board. I'm Eve Bolton, to my left.
Kendra Mack.
And to my right, eventually, will be Jim, our other member of the committee, Mr. Crossett. And going down that row, we have three distinguished guests.
Michael Gusman, Treasurer.
Liz Martin, Assistant Treasurer.
Lauren Haverkost, Chief Audit Executive.
And to my right. And we are going to need, or the chair is going to entertain a motion to go into a rather short, we hope, executive session for the purpose of public official, employment of public official. And I'll take the motion from my distinguished colleagues.
So move.
I'll second it, and I'm allowed to as chair. We'll vote
Yes.
yes. We're into executive session for the purpose of employment of a public official. Oh, every bit of it, probably, we're going to aim for 10:15. And we've gonna move to 6 and 7, the budget update by the treasurer and the superintendent, and evaluate pathways to create our budget. And we'll also talk more about the levy timing and type of determination and facilities. Okay? And we'll wait till Rob's got us lined up. Everybody get your mics ready. Sorry to have been delayed, gentlemen, but I'm sure you're working anyway.
Always.
Always. That's that new workplace for the last, about 10 years, right?
Sorry.
My chair doesn't have arms.
24/7.
Yep.
Oh, look at that. Look at that.
Yes. Yes. Tell me when we're on, Rob. All right, we want to welcome back. We have convened back out of our executive session that was dealing with employment of public officials. And we are back, and in the interest of time and difficult calendar today of work for everyone, we are foregoing the first 5 items on the, for new business. And we're gonna skip down to items 6 and 7. The visitors that we have here said that they weren't here particularly for those first 5, although those are terribly important. Is there anything in the old business, Mr. Treasurer, that you wanted to cover before we go to 6 and 7?
I think it's good, everything. I did put, she had in your packet, some draft goals for this year.
Yes, that's what I wanted to touch on.
So I would appreciate, feedback on, maybe that can be done in writing, so we don't slow down the overall, this meeting, but I would appreciate reviewing some feedback.
Then we will get back to you, but just right now, I'll say it in public, I think they look good. I would only maybe add what we kind of had some discussion about regarding the organization as it pertains to our school treasurers and what have you. Is I think the internal audit chief will be getting back to us, the assistant treasurer will be getting back to us, but I don't know if you want to have any, that incorporated at all or not, but that's, to me, that would be the only thing I would think about adding.
Yes. So one thing I will say is, I did change a couple of the goals because they had happened, one of which was onboarding an assistant treasurer. I'm gonna mark.
Good job, and we're not even regretting it yet.
Yes. Now, I don't know if she's regretting it or not,
She
but
probably is.
I'm gonna mark that goal as complete and move on.
Oh,
So,
good job.
so if you may, if we go to the budget update?
Let's go right to it.
All right, Rob, if you go to the next slide. Thank you, sir. So this is actually some feedback I got from some of my peers, is to, as we talk through the budget, remind folks how we got here. And I'm going to take the opportunity to do this every time that I have an opportunity. And just to remind folks that the district had a fairly stable, funding mechanism, the way we had our tax levies and the state funding that worked for years. Unfortunately, the last property tax refund legislation moved the district off the 20 mil floor, meaning we get virtually no increases going forward in property tax revenue. At the same time, the state has failed to update the base cost in the Fair School Funding Plan, which leads to an ever decreasing amount of state funding and state share. We are actually going to move to become a guarantee district starting soon. And what a guarantee district means is that the way the formula is now so skewed that you go back to the amount of funding you would have gotten in 2020. So that means in fiscal year 2027, the state will be giving us the same amount of money we had in 2020. Not to mention all the changes we've had to population, to extra mandates from the state, to all the other things that have happened. And as I'll continue to say, our costs, of course, continue to rise. The government just kind of re-upped the inflation rate. They're expecting inflation this year to end at
well over 3.
2.7% is the economics. It probably is higher than that individually right now. And then on certain things, it's even higher than that. So the cost of doing business continues to rise, where district's revenues continue to be flat, and that is how we got in this situation. It is not a reflection on anyone in this room, but we are responding to external pressures. And I want to start our conversation today saying that, because and setting that tone before we get into the pathways.
Okay, keep going.
All right. So some of these slides are kind of carry over from the last business meeting, so I'll go quickly. One of the feedbacks was to put a little more emphasis. If you go to the next slide, Rob, on the pathways. There was some criticism that some of them showed some bias on which pathways were preferred. So tried to restate each pathway under benefits, risk, and effects on academic outcomes. Hopefully that gives a more balanced approach to each of those pathways. I will also say, if you'll go to the next slide, now we're starting to get pathways on pathways. So in the work that the superintendent has had us working on, and in our groups, you're starting to see now our pathways start to branch as people think through these ideas and start to say, hey, what about this? What about that? And I think that's good work. It's good work. It's showing creativity. It's showing people starting to think through different ways to tackle the same problems or to provide the same outcome, provide the same benefits for less.
I would just to make one comment.
Yes, ma'am.
That decentralizing, it would, just from a public perception of what that means, it makes it much clearer if you say back to the schools. And I know that's not the whole piece, but that makes more sense than decentralizing, at least to the public.
It's a big word.
School-based, whatever, because that was the concept of that decentralized approach, was getting the strength and the resources in the schools. So, I mean, I don't know, just as a thought.
Yeah.
Corridor-based as well?
It could be, I don't,
Yeah.
I just, decentralized is a bureaucratic term instead of a heartwarming schools. Keep going.
Yes. Yeah, and then we talked about, and yeah, all these pathways could probably use some marketing, some marketing work. But when you're in the weeds trying to come up with a quick definition is sure. We talked about the pre-COVID level and then kind of working back from that. There are a couple of variations to that. If you go to slide 40, we even talked about Superintendent Murphy, I think, mentioned it at some point earlier today, talking about the tiering model and using tiers of support to try to assign resources. I think that has been a very good academic practice. That can also be applied to other things that are non-academic. So that was really good. I think you're also finding, again, Rob, on slide 45, we're starting to blend some ideas. As we talk through these things, you're starting to blend some ideas, which I think most folks realize was kind of going to be inevitable. That there was going to be a blending, that we were going to pick and choose. This is really great from decentralized. This might be really great from pre-COVID. This might be really great from partnerships.
Well, and the public discussion at the most recent board meeting was a blending of all three. And that wasn't a cop-out, that was a recognition of reality, whatever works, as a package, not just as one line.
So I probably a good point to kind of pause and take board member questions, comments on the pathways. Superintendent, do you want to add anything before? I'm sorry. Okay, sorry.
Jim? Keep going.
Okay, so those are the pathways. We continue to work on them. I'm sure there'll be some robust discussion on Monday. So other side of this are what we're called the high priority items. I think another way to look at those are items that exist in all pathways. Thank you, Rob. As Rob showed, the slide 47, 48, I guess, where we're at. is kind of a breakdown of those high priority items.
Could we?
Yes, ma'am.
This, where you are now, that.
Yes.
In front of us. Is it, my recollection that the most specifically itemized listing of those three was the one with the 70-some million?
Yes.
That the next one had categories, but they were categories. And then have we yet seen the school-based piece?
Yes, so attached to the board docs, we provided a school-by-school list as well. Rob, can you click through the bottom link, Rob? I'm sorry. Your other bottom, sir. And then we pray this works. So, right. So yes, there is there's a document there that has by school, by type. So you can see for any school, there's source of formula is what we would kind of say, and then the number of positions for each group, and that
And
goes.
that is available on board docs
That is available on board
for
docs.
our guests in the room right now, as well as the public.
Yes.
Jim?
So this is, the underlying data for this is based on projected enrollment?
Yes, and I do want to caveat that, I should have put it on the slide. All of these things are based on the current enrollment projections that we have, and you take that and you apply that to the staffing formulas that exist. I do think we have an opportunity in the near future to work with our union partners and reevaluate the staffing projections. They're done. I don't know, Jeremy, probably Mr. Gallagher is here, but probably like December-ish they were done, the last round of staffing projections. And so, one of the things that us nerds like to do is update our projections as we get more information. I think we're probably
Appreciate that.
we're probably at that point. Yeah, we just got the county tax settlement in the email yesterday, so now
Okay.
I haven't looked at it, but very excited to go back in and do my nerd work on that. But so that would be an opportunity. These numbers could change depending on what the enrollment looks like.
So, is it possible to have for each school a range of enrollment, like most likely, high end, low end? Is that just too much work? The reason I'm asking is it possible in this process to have sort of a range of what this dollar amount, this 400 million, or is it range between 390 and 410? I mean, there's some moving parts, big moving parts in enrollment, right? Between now and the fall?
Let Mr.
Mr.
Gallagher.
Gallagher?
Yeah, I'm asking that because you're here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, from the projection of an enrollment specifically, it is kind of built into a range already to a certain extent. I mean, yes, it's possible. Yes, we could present it that way. We were ultimately, kind of refine it down to a single number, because then in the process of matching the staffing to that, when we're allocating like the number of students for a teacher, that's going to fall into a range that meets those requirements already. It's not going to necessarily match out one-to-one.
So you're already doing that using a most likely number?
Correct.
Knowing that there is some, all right, thank you.
Questions by board members? Okay, keep going.
Okay, so the next slide is just some titles of staff that fall into each of those buckets, just so people who don't want to dig through the entire document can skim that. But CBA compliance is classroom teachers, PAM teachers, clerical support, building engineers. The one thing I will say, and like while these teachers are under CBA compliance, there is a legal number of teachers we must have. We kind of moved this discussion to high priorities, but there is a state mandate that you cannot go below. So in the purest sense of things, there would be a number, and then the CBA compliance comes on top of that. But
I would like to add, though, from remembering some board discussions from last year and even the most recent one, telling us what is gonna be in every school, let's say, is extremely useful and helpful, and without that, I'm sure we wouldn't be willing to take any action.
Yes.
But telling us what is there is not necessarily telling the board what's going. And then by asking us to vote on what you're proposing without us knowing what that doesn't include will cause multiple questions by the board members, as well as some, shall I say, slowing of the process. Is there going to be a list of eventually the things that aren't getting funded? I know we've tried
Yeah.
to stay away from the issue of cuts, but if the board is gonna ask, is gonna be asked to vote for things to do, if they don't understand what that means, what we're not doing, that's gonna cause concern for the board and maybe delay any action that the board would take.
No, that is a great question. If you'll indulge me for a couple of
Please.
slides.
Please.
Rob, if you'll, so just, and I think there's a lot of unclarity on my part about the pathways, and so I'm try to clear that up for this. So this was the original slide that we presented way back and forth. If you go one more, Rob, this kind of breaks it into the smaller buckets.
Thank you.
So you see that. And then the third one is kind of really how it works, is that all of these things are part of the pathway. So whichever arrow to the top you take, all of these things live in each of those, if that makes sense. And then the next slide, and I think this goes directly to your question, is how we get here. If we look at it as a timeline, so we flip the pathway document into a timeline. You can see, legal requirements we dealt with in March. High priority items we're dealing with in April. The little thick line there at the bottom is kind of the "you are here."
And is that still only the 70 million?
That is all
That's
of.
all of it,
That's all of
okay.
it. Yes. The reason there's not a "this is what's out at this point" document, and certainly we could create that, is because this is the kind of midpoint, I would say, of the budget process. And this is a midpoint, so anything that's not to the left of the line, or anything that's not to the left of the line, doesn't mean it's a cut at this point. It means it's still to be considered, if that makes sense.
But is it the plan of the administration to be asking for a vote on April 20th by the board?
That- April 20th is definitely the pathway discussion. There is an item on the agenda for a vote.
Yes?
We'll see where that
Well,
goes.
I'm just saying that you're
Yes,
gonna be asking the board to vote on something, regardless of where we are in the,
Is the vote for the high priority?
Vote is for the high priority. It could be multiple votes, and perhaps it could not be a vote. I mean,
so. but-
there's the will of
but
the
that
will
is-
of the board here.
But that is everything, meaning the 70 and the 240. the
Yes.
what- Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, see, that's asking a lot of the board.
That is asking a lot. Yeah, and one of the ways that I frame this is, and I think this would be good board conversation, is looking at the things that are in that 400, and specifically the 70, but also in the other spots. When the district approves the final appropriation in June, are there things that are in the high priority proposal today that you don't see being in the final budget? And if there are, I think that is feedback we as the administration need to receive and be able to take back and rework what we're doing.
Remember that, yeah, comment?
Just trying to conceptualize some things here, and so as I'm looking at the high priority items, and I recognize that this could be subjective in some sense of like my thinking about it, but so from you all's standpoint, the high priorities are specifically the CBA, compliance as well as state and federal compliance. Because I'm just thinking about as we're navigating the budget conversations and top of mind, my thoughts are always around just the academic success of our students and the operational efficiency to help with that academic success. And so while it may not necessarily align with these, I guess, examples of high priority, I'm curious to know, like, what is the thinking, what is the process that you all are working through to help us achieve those academic goals that we have, even though it may not be the CBA compliance or state and federal compliance, because it could still be a high priority, I guess,
Yeah, the hard part is,
position
yes,
or,
ma'am.
so,
Yeah.
so yeah, I'm trying to help me work through that, because I
That's
think
the
that may
hard
be the
part of,
concern.
yes, ma'am, that's exactly the hard part of doing this. The things that, some of the things that we feel are important may not necessarily be in the CBA or may not be state mandated. And so we didn't put it in this category. Does not mean that there won't be some form or function of it. We're not done. We know that we know that there's an expectation around improving student outcomes as it relates to academics, just one example. And so we know that we have to have an academic plan to share with you that you would support. It's just that some of those pieces are not a part of what we know we have to deal with compliance-wise. Happy to get more specific. The timing of all of this sometimes is a little challenging.
If I may, I think the phrase high priority is,
Was a bad term. And the president said that in the last board meeting. He said that terminology was maybe misguiding.
I mean, I mean,
So again, vocabulary makes a big difference when people are communicating. I'm just laying that out.
Really, the high priority is all compliance.
Yeah, that's what it is.
yeah.
Maybe, I don't know.
Or that's as it's being presented, yeah.
Correct, yeah.
Maybe not, I don't know. Go ahead, Treasurer.
No, I would say through our process, this is the administration's, reading of collective bargaining agreements, reading of state and federal mandates. Do I think we're perfect? No. I mean, it's a considered thing, but yes, everyone who sees high priority will interpret that. And again, that was bad terminology. Probably compliance is a little better.
You can vote on compliance, which we already voted something about compliance
We voted on
already.
legal
Of
requirements.
140 million or
Yes.
something.
Well, maybe instead of high priority, we can make this compliance, and then that peach line, instead of school-based CBA compliance, it's just CBA. So we can make that edit.
Whatever, I'm just saying. And again, you're asking the board to vote on something, but the board will want to know if I vote on that, it means that I'm not gonna have this. But are you able yet to tell us what we're not gonna have? I mean, and it's not half full, half empty, it's
Yeah, because
living with
I
a
think-
vote,
yeah.
a public
Yeah,
vote.
because I think this ultimately forces or drives us to say, okay, well, we're gonna have to make sure that we're compliant, but it doesn't give us any other options or room, right, to make a determination different from this, because it's ultimately gonna suggest if we don't vote in favor of this, then we're not gonna be in compliance. And so I'm sure that all of us is gonna strive to make sure that we're doing that, but I think we could be missing some critical pieces here. Does that make sense?
Well, if we vote on this, there are things that are getting cut.
There are things that are
Yes.
gonna be
And-
suggested.
But the board has to understand what those kinds of things might be, as well as knowing what we are voting for. Because there's back to after we do all that, then, we're down to, okay, now we have $85 million left. What would you like to put in? Or supposedly we do. And so we go back and pick up what we cut, or is this our new initiatives? Is this our strategic plan?
And see, that's,
It's a combination.
yeah, that's,
It truly is a combination.
and that was the pathway concept, was once these items, we'll call them compliance items, are done, you have $85 million to hit the budget target. And so the idea was that the administration would create proposals for the board to review using that $85 million. That would be very specific. This is in, this is out of this one. This is in, this is out of that one. To get all of that feedback, to then come to, I think, as discussion was, a blended kind of singular pathway.
It's almost always been a strategy, though, to get it to where the board's only voting on such a small portion of the budget. The previous treasurer used to call it initiatives. What new things do you want to do? And we've already made millions and millions of dollars of decisions, and all taken the hit for whatever those decisions were. My concern is that the board has to know what it's not doing when it is asked to do something. Because we don't want to get a big vote, and then here's everything that didn't get done, folks, and here's the $85 million left to do it. And you're gonna end, I mean, I think that there has to be some effort there to follow up. Jim, sorry.
Would it be helpful, if you go to slide just before this one? Yeah, okay. On the left, there's a column that has the 142 and the 553, the 627. Would it be possible to look at this current year, how we're spending the money in those areas? How much are we spending for legal requirements this year? How much are we spending for, not necessarily compliance, but really high priority items? And just to, that might frame, how much it is that we don't have money to spend on. I don't know if that's helpful. I'm trying to get it away.
We do have Jeremy has a spreadsheet that does show this is how much we spend in this category for 25-26, and this is what 26-27 could look like.
If that's Eve, would that be helpful?
It's all, I'm trying to be,
Eve, would that be helpful too?
I'm just trying to make sure we know that we want to expedite the budget process as quickly as we can. There are other decisions that are depending upon it. I'm just saying that if you ask people to vote on something they don't have enough information about, they're not going to vote on it. My point is that trying to do the big chunk, let's go to the 50 slide, the one that's broken down, the 142, which we already did. And then you have school-based CBA compliance. That you've given us the forms for that now, and that's very helpful. That's a chunk that you can vote for. I think the board could probably live with that based upon what you've shared. But to see that, they would also want to know what you're not putting in the schools. I mean, is this right? Okay. So then the school-based state and federal compliance, well, there you go. If you put those two together, now we're talking about schools, but then we've reached a point where we're kind of dissing the centrally managed budgets by saving those for the last. I think there's a way to chunk some of these votes if we have enough information. And because we want to stay on track.
Yes.
We want to vote on some portion of that budget on Monday night. And it has to be you all being, and you have been this is as specific as we've ever seen anything. This is all very good. But you have to have the board have a comfort level about this. And I don't know how you want to approach that, but yeah, school-based CBA compliance, Since you've listed that, then, okay, that means we're not gonna have this. Or don't count on this being assessed to the schools.
So Jeremy, do you think that spreadsheet would be helpful in this feedback, with this feedback?
I'm contemplating. Definitely taking in, in preparation for Monday and thinking through some of the processes. I'm trying to clarify, at least for me, and I hopefully not speaking too out of turn.
No, never.
That when we're talking about like seeing what the board, what we're not including, when we use those kind of terms, right? What we would not be having. So I'm trying to process through in terms of like, this list is providing those things we have the list of everything that's not included in these numbers, correct? Like if we were to say our entire ask to meet the entire demands of the district today, including those initiatives we believe we can fulfill for the board and everything else, is X. It's the total amount that we have, that we think we need to do all of that. We know that amount exceeds what our target is, right, to meet everything. So by chunking it out, when we're saying this is the 400 million, the 84 that's left, there is a known list of items that comprises the more asks that's left. We know we only have 84 to put into those asks. So we're saying what's not there. You're essentially saying what's not in this list that then would be in the total list for everything if we were to give you that entire list. Does that make sense?
It makes sense to me. I would like to know, I don't know if that's what
Go
you're
ahead,
asking
go
for,
ahead.
but I would like to know what the list consists of, to be able to compare it against what is not on this actual spreadsheet that's been provided.
So for our work, I believe that list, like I said, we do have that internally, what we're working with. That list represents what we're working with to say,
Still, yeah.
right, that we're still that's the working
Yes.
list of here's all this stuff that's left. The 84 million is here. So for those pathways, how do we divide up what's left into the various pathways to get back to what we actually have as our target?
And we're truly not
Finish.
comfortable to say to you, this is what we're not doing, because we want your feedback to know what direction we should move in. So that's the hard part.
The thing
Which is one of the reasons why we vote on budgets in June instead of trying to vote on budgets in April.
it's true.
So, because we're being asked to vote on something that's still a work in progress. And, go ahead, Jim, sorry.
I'm still not sure what direction you want from us.
There could be things that we would share with you that you're gonna say, for, just for example, if we wanted to change transportation, that's not something we've presented to you. But if that's an example, in the past, for me, a few times you've said no in certain areas. And I do think that if there was something at this point we changed about transportation, it would not be helpful to our school district. So there is room to make budget cuts with transportation legally, but I don't think, based on what I've
Yeah, it
received
won't
as
be
feedback
happening.
from our school board in the past,
So,
wouldn't
I'm
fly.
not sure, I don't know, from where I'm sitting, I'm not sure I can give you direction. I almost feel like I understand about the 400 million, and you're saying, this is stuff that's either compliance or high priority, and that we really should get it down to this 84 million, and we've got a list of things that this 84 million can get used for. But it would, I think, I don't know, I wouldn't mind it if you guys had a little bit more of a recommendation of some options for us to look at, rather than just saying, assuming what we did in the past, because based on where we are, I don't want to assume anything about what we did in the past. And I
Jim,
wouldn't want you to be stuck there either. And we got to look at this with the fresh eyes and holistically, and so I don't know, am I saying anything helpful?
that's helpful, but I would say, to me, this is their recommendation,
Well,
because they have prioritized these things. They have properly so. The legal requirement, boy, that was a wink and a blink. Yeah, okay, we'll go to jail if we don't do that.
Right.
That's a pretty easy vote. But then when these next two levels, the school-based compliance and the school-based federal, to me, that is, that's the treasurer and the superintendent coming in
Right.
and saying, we are recommending that you vote for this because we have to have this. That's our recommendation. I think they're recommending the 235 and the 93 million that we're, and I think we as board members would be hard pressed to say, well, no, we know better than you. I
Right.
mean, I don't think that is helpful. That's a recommendation there. But I'm concerned that people are not going to have the comfort level to vote the positive unless they understand the possibility of what is not going to be.
So the conversation we had at SLT the last 2 weeks is part to whole or whole to part. And I think some board members are asking, we've been giving part to whole and you want more whole to part. We can give you where we are right now, but we're not finished. We're not finished.
And, I mean,
And I just need you to understand that and you know, not get upset and think that we're saying it's a value statement on some of these pieces, because it's not. It's like, it's two things. It's like, what do we want to dream? But at the same time, here are our limitations for how far we can go. I would just need your understanding in that area.
So,
Jim?
so for the April 20th board meeting, I would think our board would be pretty comfortable voting for the CBA compliance and the state and federal compliance. Central budget might be easy for us to vote on that, to know what we're spending on central managed budget this year. Like, is it the same? Is it less? That might be an interesting number. That would be helpful for the board meeting on the 20th. And then what you're saying is, for the pathway discussion, for the last 84 million, we're really not ready to talk about that.
The
on Monday.
pathway will probably be a hybrid of the things that we've
But
discussed.
that's down the road. That's another meeting. That's
And-
not Monday.
I think, to your point, or I'll say for me, I think I would be okay, obviously, with the CBA compliance, state and federal. I would still have my reservations about centrally managed budget and the pathways. So that's what I would need more context around. Because again, I don't want us to be forced into making a decision with us not having enough information to drive that decision.
But if we give you that, I just need you to understand, we're not saying that there won't be other things that we did last year not included at the end of the day.
Yeah, like, please understand, the centrally managed budget item portion of this does not represent what we're doing currently at central office.
Correct.
It is a significant reduction
Sure is.
from what we have today. Because we thought, as we thought through it, we wanted to leave as much leeway as possible for the things that aren't in. I mean, my only concern, I would say, with saying what's not included in the we'll use high priority for the sake of it's out here, but in these compliance items is, if we put out a list that says these things are not included, that creates the panic of all these things are going to be cut, and that is not a recommendation that the superintendent or I are making, or anyone in the administration. It is that these things are still in the consideration.
But Mike, when you and Shauna present what you are proposing, there is a list of what you're not proposing. And proactively, that might be panic, but it's better than people like trying to figure out what it is, which is what will happen.
True.
And you're asking the board to vote, I guess, on the 235 and the 9. Again, I'm not sure, and I'm finance chair. I have no idea what we're being expected to vote on Monday. And I find that a problem. But the 93 and the 235, you will have board members asking you, yeah, that makes sense, you're recommending, these are your recommendations. There'll be 4 votes based upon you recommending it. Oh, okay.
No, I don't know.
So that's not what we're looking for. But my point is that you will have to tell us what is not included. Or
We
you'll
can-
have
we
to
can-
tell at least a few board members.
We can bring the board where we are right now. This is what we think we need and can make work. This is what we're grappling with.
Halfway through the, not, a little bit more than halfway through the process, because we are voting on stuff months earlier than we usually would vote on the final product. Because we want to and we need to. You have to present how you're gonna make your recommendation, because these are recommendations, these are proposals from the administration. And you wanna make a recommendation so that it gets approved. Just saying, for all 7 board members, they will, when they vote positively, they will want to know, and maybe it's just where we are now, we're not doing this. But we could be at our next vote. But how will they publicly or, publicly share their concerns if they don't know what it is that we're not doing? So,
I think the
Jim?
way to phrase it is, these are the things that we haven't committed to do yet.
okay,
Not to say this is not what we're not doing.
but
these are
this
the-
is what we're committing to.
Correct.
But the board needs to know what those that we're not doing.
Not
Or
necessarily
not committed
needs
to.
Yet.
I'm happy to say that. I'm just saying you just can't have just the proposed definites,
Yeah.
and we don't, and the board doesn't know what that does not include.
But it doesn't mean we might not cut those things.
Well, and very frankly, that's when you're gonna have 300
And you
people in
always
each
say
room,
words
yes.
about it.
Yes.
And we're trying to avoid line item, and we're trying to avoid where there is panic and 700 people show up because of the list of what we're not doing. I understand that, but it is a public document, and people have a right to know what it is that we're, so,
It's still under consideration.
yeah, maybe that's it, but that'll be a good crowd pleaser. Lord. Oh, keep going, what else do we have, because we got a time frame problem.
Okay, so appreciate
By the
the
way,
fe-
appreciate you for
appreciate
doing
the
this
feed-
today.
Yeah, appreciate the
This is
feedback.
amazing work and really
Yeah.
amazing presentation and really, I appreciate what
the-
this team is doing. And I know it's incredibly hard work.
I mean, even when you guys said the legal requirements, okay, I mean, you would be amazed. That was challenging.
I bet.
Even.
You know, I
Keep going.
do think like this is the really nice thing about having the finance committee is that we get some feedback today.
This is sort of
That-
dress rehearsal.
that-
and it-
that
Dress
a lot-
rehearsal is always ugly.
Yeah, but we get good feedback from 3 board members today that allows us to then refine what we're going to say on Monday,
And that's our purpose.
that is always appreciated.
That is our purpose, and we appreciate the work that comes to us in finance and the whole team approach, we really do.
Yes. So one, I'm not going to go over this, but it's in there. We can talk about it Monday as well. There's a question and answer review. So any board members that submitted questions were answered to the best of the administration's ability.
Appreciate
Thanks
it.
Superintendent and her team. Those were not, most of these answers, few of the things I could answer on my own, most of them though required collaboration. You know, if it's a purely financial number, easy to do, but a lot of collaboration, quick turnaround, so thank you. I think we've provided a lot of information, obviously, still plenty of questions, so let's tackle those head on. Ms. Bolton, you asked for, and I think Mr. Crossett's asked for this as well, looking forward, and this is an important thing as we wrap up this budget, is that whatever we do this year does not fix the structural school funding issues.
Yes.
And it's important to say that. So one of the ideas that Mr. Crossett gave us and we worked through it was looking at our revenues versus inflation. So this graph basically pins both of those numbers at 2022 and says if our revenues from 2022 on would grow at the rate of inflation, where would they be? The blue line is our forecast.
Oh, wow.
And if you look in the grid at the top there, you can see how that gap works. And the gap continues to increase every year as our revenues are not keeping up with the pace of inflation.
Does this take into account that we're a guaranteed district?
Yes, yes. If we were not a guarantee district, this would be significantly worse. So just one more slide, Rob. Just looking at FY '28, I know this is hard. Looking at FY '28, we are anticipating increase of revenue by 2.7 million. Our employee step increases will be approximately 6 million. So no matter what we do now, FY '28 starts with a $3.3 million budget gap. And that is if not one contract, service, or supply increases in price. And I think we can all agree that's not a realistic based on the inflationary environment we live in. So it's probably a great segue to our second topic.
I'm not sure. I have a question. You say a 3.3 budget gap, but on the previous slide, FY '28, the revenue gap's 29 million.
That slide is, again, that slide is just based on inflationary. If our revenue had kept pace with inflation, this is where we'd be sitting at.
If it kept
Yes,
with
yes. So,
inflation.
yeah,
Okay.
so like for next year, next year we're looking at $630 million in revenue.
Yeah.
Had we stayed with inflation, we'd be at 660. Those $30 million would be huge for anything that the district needs to do.
So this 3.3 million gap isn't, it assumes that we would have money to keep with inflation.
$3.3 million gap is what we're gonna start next year with. After this year is fully balanced, put in the books, approved by the board, we move forward. When we start looking at next year, again, the revenue's projected to increase by 2.7 million. Step increases are gonna be
Okay,
6.
I see it's a gap before
We're-
we
we're-
account for inflation.
We're automatically in a gap, and then that doesn't include the strategic plan stuff and doesn't include 1 penny of inflationary pressure.
So really, you could add the 29 million on the previous slide plus the 2.3.
I would say my point is, no matter however rough this year's budget conversation is going to be, we are going to repeat this every year until something changes with our funding picture.
Okay, thank you.
I think that's important to say.
Other comments? Okay,
Which is my segue
yep,
to item number 7, levy timing and determination.
yep.
I don't have a lot of new information here. I included the slides from previous times just for reference, so people would have them as references. Kind of know where we're at, we know what's available. I did add slide 62 and it's in your packets. There is some new information from folks around us. So I think that was interesting. And I forgot to link one of the documents in there. If you go back, Rob, sorry, slide 61, sorry, friend. You can see there's quite a few school districts are on the ballot in May for both income taxes traditional and some bond levies. I think that's important to know. Again, I forgot to link the document from Dr. Fleeter, but he does an analysis of what schools are doing. There's a lot of folks in the ballot. I would say this is going to be something we will get used to. I mean, the intent of property tax reform was to do this, was to put districts on the ballot much
Kill the
more
schools.
frequently. Yes, just to remind people, it's been 10 years since we had any new money asked at CPS. Before that, it was 8 years, so I went back and looked at that. The current property tax laws are gonna force districts to be on the ballot much more frequently.
You mentioned in one of the things that you're writing, that white paper to try to help explain where we are. I've seen that, a draft of that. But there's a sentence that just basically says, our whole strategy for the last many years has been rendered obsolete
Yes,
by the state legislature.
yes. Let me expand on that a little
I
bit.
think that's the lead part to explain to the board and everybody. That just our whole plan that has kept us solvent, good stewards of our dollars, is now obsolete. It does not work because the state legislature changed property tax. We don't have to go to the public for some referendum or initiative. The state legislature's already done this to us.
Yes, let me elaborate a little bit.
Yes.
So traditionally, our funding, and if you get, I don't know, I think there's a levy slide in here to use as a background, Rob. I think it's 57 or 58. Keep one more, sir. So traditionally, the district has relied on a series of current expense levies, and those are your fixed rate levies. They decrease in value every year because of House Bill 920, and a series of emergency levies. And that was a specific strategy. These emergency levies got the district a fixed amount of money every year. They did not count against a 20 mil floor, and so strategy was the district would hit the 20 mil floor and would get the reappraisal increases from being at the 20 mil floor, while also getting the emergency levy money. And those are things like, some of those are just operating, but it's also, the preschool expansion levy. Those things are very specific. They worked for our district because we could go to the taxpayers and say, for example, in the preschool levy, $15 million of this 48 is going to preschool. And people can know those numbers, vote on those numbers, and run with those numbers, right? With the recent property tax legislation, all of those emergency levies now count against your 20 mil floor. So we went from 20 mils to up in the 30s, which means we will not be back on the floor for quite some time. Because of that, the normal reappraisal increases that have kept this district kind of going for years are no longer something we're going to see. And that bears out in our forecast, that bears out in some of the graphs we had where our revenue is a flat line going out through 2029, 2030. And so with no extra pressures with no extra revenue, it just becomes, we're in a cycle of having to do reductions every single year because the cost of business goes up every single year. And that is the same for every business, every school district. I think coming from spending time with a lot of school district treasurers, I think there are two types of districts right now. There are districts who are in tough financial times now, and there are districts that will be in tough financial times in a few years. Some of it is a function of how much cash on hand these folks have. And if you have a really high cash reserve, you can weather a few more years of the storm. But the storm is coming.
Questions? Okay.
We are a fun group today, aren't we?
We are. It's
Yes, I'm sorry.
devastating.
So I'm sorry. We deflated the
Question?
room
Yeah,
multiple
ask for
times today.
question, and we'll at least-
Comment, on the, it looks like there is for the May 5th election, there is a significant amount of income tax levies.
Yes.
That is a big increase in the number of districts that are going with income tax. And I suppose this is occurring because of the current new legislation that's been, and so, but it'll be interesting. We'll have information about the success of these levies in early May, correct?
Yes, we will.
And that might be helpful insight.
Yes.
Okay.
We certainly will, I think.
Thank you.
I think a couple things are driving that. I think, income,
You're talking about this May or next May?
May 26th?
Okay.
yes, there's quite a list of districts that are,
Yep.
yeah. I think there are two things that are driving that. I think one of them is, income taxes are one of the things that has some inflation, some ability to bring in more money than initially passed. It's kind of how that works. I also think there's the constant conversation about the constitutional amendment to eliminate property taxes. I think that has definitely colored some people's thinking about what they're going to ask the voters to do.
So we'll have that information of the results, within several weeks at most, the results. If we, from a facility standpoint, Mr. Burkhart, we've been working on that, what you put together, a great effort, and as well as the phase 3 of the growth plan, part of that wish list. In your best judgment, what kind of money more are we thinking about as you look, and if we concentrate not only on our buildings, but as you have been so good about all of our campuses as well? I mean, where are we in the ballpark now if we're talking this year, this coming year, next year? I know we're not at the same dollar amount that we were.
Yeah, it's a little hard to say, but I can paint a little bit of the picture for you. Some of this is contingent upon what the city and kind of where folks within the city are migrating to. For example, we know that the Winton Hills community, we have a lot of housing over in that area. We don't know what that's going to look like in the next 5 years or 10 years. So our initial reaction is right now we should add on to Winton Hills. However, not knowing what that looks like, it's hard to say in 10 years, does that become bigger or smaller? It could be they're doubling
Or
down.
in 2 years.
Or in 2 years, exactly. We know Saylor Park needs an expansion. We know that we were talking about an expansion at Walnut. There's a couple other schools that we think that as the growth plan goes into phase 3, and as we look at those sites, we would need additional space. We are on the west side, obviously very tight with what that looks like. In the phase 3 or phase 4 or phase 5 plan, we had a new high school on the west side, which would be on the Heinold site. That would be roughly $100 million there. So if we take all those considerations in, I would say if I'm throwing out a number today, and please don't
Sure.
hold me to this,
And we won't hold you to it.
we're looking at probably close to $200 million. If we're looking at a brand new high school at $100 million, so there's half of that right there. We know that there's work that we have to do at some other schools. And so I would say right now, we're probably looking at close to 200 million. But again, we have to look at part of the discussion later today is going to be about projections and where students are going. And so we're also trying to get ahead of that.
Yeah, I guess my thoughts, I know at our previous meeting, we were talking about the facilities repairs. So I'm just trying to balance how we are talking about all the repairs that need to be made and the financial expectation that's associated with that, and now transitioning to the expansion. I don't think we're necessarily at the point of talking about expansion when we still have, as I kind of, outlined at our last meeting, how do we prioritize the buildings and support those that we already have, right? So, as I shared before, I am interested in that data, right, of that demographic study, but not so much from a space of talking about expansion, but how, as our treasurer talked about, how are we at this point even surviving, right? Ensuring that we know how to effectively project out our student enrollment data, and begin to ensure that we are able to have our students within our buildings before we're talking about that transition to expansion yet. So I don't necessarily know if we have a baseline truly and accurately of where we are expecting to be, right? And if so, then how do we make sure that we're leaning into providing that support within the schools that we currently have, and stabilizing them and getting them to a good space before we're talking about expansion of these particular schools that you've mentioned?
Yeah, a lot of fair comments. And so as, you know, obviously my priority is, you know, the 180 million worth of deferred maintenance, and we want to make sure that we, you know, tackle that and get our schools up to where we need to. But also in the background, as we think about what the district looks like a decade from now or more, just at least having that in the back of our heads, that we know the west side right now, we're strapped for classroom seats on the west side. We know at some point, unless the demographics change, that we will have to create more seats over there. Does that mean a new school? I'm not sure, but just putting those numbers so that the decisions the board makes along the way can have a 360 view of what that looks like. In relation to the demographics or the demography, I attended a session at Metro, and so Metro has worked with OKI, and OKI has a lot of data already put together, so we're going to be reaching out to them to try to get that data so that we can share it with the board to show some of that work that's already been done, so we're not recreating the wheel on where they think the growth is going to be and where they might think that there might not be growth or decline in certain neighborhoods or certain areas. So obviously that's you know, information that we're currently and always working on, just like the deferred maintenance. We're always updating that spreadsheet, you know, with newer, more up-to-date information. So as we see trends and as we see things change, we're updating that in real time. So again, it's there mainly for the board to make informed decisions moving forward.
Mr. Crossett?
Quick thought, I was down at that Rothenberg Town Hall last night, and the city council announced that they're investing in renovations at Winton Terrace. So maybe you might want to get the city information about where they're investing, because that might help us determine where we need to invest in schools.
Yeah,
They said that's the first renovation they've done in that area in a long time. So for whatever that's worth, I mean, there's other information we probably need to gather to help us.
Well, I know the Reds Fund is expanding, spending a lot of money down at Winton Terrace area, and that is the largest recreation center in the city. And very frankly, it is a stone's throw from our school. But we don't know whether or not that housing community is going to still be in effect 2 years from now. It's smaller than it used to be. I used to go to school with all those folks. It was much bigger many thousands of years ago than it is. Same with Roll Hill. What if Roll Hill closes? I'm talking about the community, because they're being sold. So all these demographic housing facilities downtown. What if City West, I mean, all these changes that the city is making, I'm glad they're investing in Winton Terrace, and that's the Recreation Commission, thank you very much, that's doing that. But you know, wow. The city is not, we have to find where they are doing that, because generally their entire housing plan has not helped us at all.
The strategy that we are finding ourselves in is you were exactly right. We don't know what's going to happen 2 years from now in relation to that. But we also can't wait until after it happens before we have
exactly.
a couple of different plans. So it could double, it could shrink. And so we have to be ready for both of those to be ready, because we've seen other districts who have waited until after folks have showed up, and then you have modular classrooms all over the place. And I don't think we want to get into that situation either.
Well, I'm all about being proactive, but again, as I've stated at our, I've stated several times over and at our previous meeting, that with the growth plan, we've made decisions, we've moved students where in fact it impacted our numbers drastically. And Mr. Gallo, he talked about the decline with our enrollment. And so as we're thinking about making decisions moving forward, I want to ensure that we do have, as much accurate information as possible so that we are able to be strategic in our planning. So we're saying the same things in many ways, but again, so I'm all about being proactive, but I'm also adamant about the strategy that we apply to whatever decision we make so that it will ultimately yield the results that we're expecting to see within our district.
Any other comments? Somebody said something about transportation. I know we're not, okay, good. Thank God. It's the T word. As we are beginning to lose our quorum,
We've
and we
used
do
all our
want
four
to have our time to end, because I know the next thing is happening relatively soon. What's the likelihood of another facilities report that takes into a consideration where we are, what's been done, what you foresee, and what would be part of if there's growth or there's change? I mean, where are we close to having that newer version of the old version, as well as maybe a newer version even of the growth piece?
Yeah, so we have the I'm going to call it version 3 of the growth plan, which is beyond just what I'm going to call right sizing the schools within itself. We are looking at the current projections moving forward, looking at those under-enrolled schools to figure out what that actually means long-term. Is it under-enrolled for a short period of time, or is it under-enrolled for a more longer period of time? With that, we will be putting together with the information from OKI where we think we would need additional spaces, or where we would see spaces that are diminishing to the point where, again, these are all scientific guesses of what's going to happen over the next decade. We know that as different factors push and pull on different communities and different neighborhoods, they could, increase or decrease in their enrollments.
Having lived through the FMP, 1.7 billion, the number one thing is to be as close to being right as you can be, and knowing that you're gonna be wrong. And so the result is flexibility. Because even at the end of the facilities master plan, when it was finally done, we still had to add 6 more buildings. The state was still wrong about what our projection was gonna be. They thought 28,000, and it wasn't that. So the idea is whatever we're doing, we have to be flexible even when we close a school, which we've done, or where we, in facilities master plan, we had to move money from one school project to another. And a classic one of them was moving money out of a West Side building, because we determined that, and we closed it down, and moving it, if you will, to Aiken, because initially we didn't think Aiken was gonna be as large as we then figured out it was gonna be. So it's still moving, but the flexibility, but you can only do the best that you can do. And you're gonna be close, but knowing what OKI is saying, that's critical. Knowing what the city is saying, and knowing where we could join with either private investors or other public investors like the Recreation Commission, where we could join together to do things and use the same resources or combine the resources. But it's critical. Any other comments for the good of the order as we finish out? CFT? Okay, Madam President, are you okay back there? Brain Trust, everybody okay? All you big brain people?
I have 2,
Go for it, Mike.
Brad has his
Just
hand up.
wanted to remind the board members
Oh,
who are
Brad.
present of your fiduciary responsibility as board members. It's very, very clear. But again, based on state policies, state government, state legislature, we need new money. And so I hope that this board recognizes that that is your responsibility and that you act in that manner.
Thank you, Brad, appreciate that.
Two things lightning around here, but just
for it.
for committee's meeting, there were 3 CRA agreements
Yes, saw
that are
those.
in the slide deck. Those will be in the treasurer's report. So I wanted to
Great.
give you the heads up on that. And then also the unclaimed funds report. We
Yes.
do this annually. We are allowed to move unclaimed funds over 5 years back to the general fund.
Correct?
So we will be moving $8,423 at the end of this fiscal year back to the general fund. So wanted.
Pizza money.
Yeah, so just for the awareness of this committee, so you know, so when you see it in the treasurer's report, you know, you're
Thank you.
you're aware of it. But
Appreciate it.
and we will submit the rest of the financial reports as written.
Absolutely. Thank you all, and a good day to everyone.